Hello and welcome to today's Bitrix24 webinar, Better Business Processes. Thank you for joining today. So just to introduce myself before we go through the webinar today, my name is Sam Connor, a sales engineer here at Interface, and we are a Bitrix24 Gold partner. So we're based in the UK, in the US and Hong Kong, and we offer a full range of services to help you with Bitrix24, starting off with pre-sales support, where we can discuss your requirements in detail and really evaluate if Bitrix24 would be a good fit for your business. If it is, we can then implement the system for you and set it up for your specific requirements. For the self-hosted edition, we offer our own hosting services, and we can also provide training and ongoing dedicated support to really help you get the most out of Bitrix24. And if you're new to Bitrix24, if you joined the webinar today to understand some of the functionality in more detail, Bitrix24 is a collaboration suite of in excess of 35 tools to help you in managing your business. And specifically today, we're going to be looking at how we can create our very own business processes inside Bitrix24. There are over 8 million organizations around the world that use Bitrix24, and the system is available in two different editions. So you have the Bitrix24 Cloud Edition and also the Bitrix24 self-hosted system as well. And prices start from $19 per month for a cloud license and $1,490 for a self-hosted lifetime license. Okay, so today's webinar, Better Business Processes. First of all, we need to understand what are business processes. So a business process is a flow of information defined by either a route or a scheme inside the system. And Bitrix24 includes a very advanced editor tool. So it allows you to build simple action blocks for you to construct your very own business processes. And within the Bitrix24 system, there are different types of business processes that you can create. So as you can see here, we have sequential, we have state-driven, and we have automation. So first of all, what we should do is have a look at those different types of processes in a little more detail. Okay, so let's just go into our Bitrix24 system. So the first type of process we've mentioned there is a sequential business process. And that's what we can see here on this page. So a sequential business process will perform a series of consecutive actions on an item. And most importantly, you start from a predefined starting point, and then you flow through those different blocks inside the process until you come down to the finish. So if I go to the end of this process, this is quite a long, detailed workflow in this section, we can see the end point. Okay, so you go through a flow there from the start to the finish with different actions in between. So this is our sequential business process. The second type of process is called a state-driven process. Okay, so a state-driven business process, you can see really the key difference here, it does not have a start or an endpoint. Okay, so there is no predefined start and endpoints to this. What it is a series of statuses. So for example, here we have a draft status, we have a publishing status, and an approval status. And based on that status, it will then trigger a child process inside that status. So for example, in the draft stage, we're going to send this document for approval, and it will then be published. So you very commonly see a state-driven process on documents. And the third type of business process is what we call automation. So very commonly you will use this and see this inside the CRM system, inside leads and deals. And what automation allows you to do is based on different stages. So here we're in the lead section. These are our lead stages. We can run automated rules and processes. And this can either be internal processes. For example, it may be creating a task for the responsible person of this lead, or we can also do client communications. So for example, in this automation, as soon as the lead comes in at the new lead stage, we're going to automatically send out an email communication to that lead. So that's automation inside the CRM system. Another aspect to automation is the ability to create triggers, and a trigger will automatically update the stage of the lead for you. So for example, if you sent an email to a lead, if they clicked on that specific link, we could use a trigger and automatically update them to, for example, the looking good stage. So triggers are a way of automatically updating a lead or a deal in a specific process. And just while we're talking about automation, I just want to bring you into what we call the robotic process automation. So Bitrix24 had quite a few pieces of feedback from clients saying that the business process designer that you can see here, it could be fairly complex for some clients. So what they have done is they have used some of the automation features inside the CRM system and built a brand new workflow creation tool called Robotic Process Automation. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to create your own stages for a workflow, just like you have stages in leads and deals. You can then create different types of automations. And this allows you to basically run your very own workflows through those different stages. So for example, here we have an expenses workflow. So we will submit an expense in the system, and that will then automatically be routed to the supervisor to either approve or reject. Okay, and we'll have a look at the robotic process automation in some more detail shortly. Okay, so those are the different types of business processes that we can run in Bitrix24. Okay, now let's have a look at how, when they're processed and managed, we'll have a look at now where they can be run in the system. So running business processes, you can run those processes in many different areas of Bitrix24. And you can see, for example, here in the cloud and the self-hosted, we can run those in the HR and admin section. So we can run those to create leave requests and expenses. You can run business processes inside the CRM system. So really on most CRM entities, such as leads, deals, contacts, and companies, you can run a business process, and that could be manually or it could be triggered by a certain trigger. We can run processes on documents. So again, that would very much be using the state-driven business processes. So you could automatically or manually trigger, such as an approval process on a document. We also have lists, and lists are tables of information, very commonly found in the project management area. So we can run processes inside a list. On tasks, we can run processes and automation rules as a task is going through certain steps. And also with the online store, when an order is generated, we can use automation to process that sales order. With the self-hosted edition, there are some additional areas we can run business processes, such as on user profiles, or you could also build a kind of a custom application. So if you wanted to, we could build a very bespoke and custom process that could run in a certain area of Bitrix. Okay, so let's just have a look at some of those locations in the Bitrix24 system. So if we just go back into our area here, first of all, we mentioned how we can run them in the HR and admin section. So if we go into the more area in our activity stream, you have a workflow section here. And this will allow you to create your very own process inside the system. So for example, I might want to run a leave approval process. So this will now open up the leave approval form, and I can now start populating those fields of information and running that leave approval workflow. We mentioned how you can create a process in the CRM system. And this could be done in any entity of the CRM. So we've got leads, deals, contacts, and companies. If, for example, we go into a company inside the system, we can see how a process can be run inside here. So in the top right-hand corner, you can see the workflow button, and I could then select which workflow I want to manually trigger here. So this is just manually triggering these workflows. You can also automatically trigger a workflow based on a certain trigger point. Okay, so that's within the CRM system. If we go into the drive area, we can also run processes on documents that are stored in the company drive. And just to point out here, to make sure you can run a process from inside the drive area, just make sure you have turned on the configure and activate a business process. So just make sure that button is ticked. And then from there, I can run a business process on our document. So this is, for example, an approval for that document. Okay, another area we mentioned about earlier on is the automation. So in leads and deals, you can use the automation features to trigger actions as we progress a lead or a deal through certain stages, or we can also send out client communications at every step of our sales process. Inside work groups, so where you can manage your projects, you have the ability to use lists, and within lists you have the business process section, so you can trigger those processes. So a very common type of list is expenses. So you can store all of the expenses, for example, on the different types of projects that you use. And from here, we could then run different types of processes. So for example, on this list, we have an approval process that we could run. And just while we're inside our projects, we also have the ability in automation on a task. So very similar to the CRM automation, but this is on tasks. So if we're progressing the task through certain stages here, we can then run automatic actions inside the task based on the stage. And this can include triggers as well. So for example, if the task here becomes overdue, so if you have a deadline on that task, if it then passes the deadline and the task has not been completed, we can then automatically, using the triggers, move that task to the urgent stage. And in the urgent stage, we're changing here who is responsible for that task. So it's going to Max Smith. So it may go to a senior project manager to get this task back on track. So that's a really good example of how you can combine triggers and automation rules inside the system. Okay, so that's some of the different areas where we can run business processes. Okay, if you do have any questions as we go through the demonstration today, please do add those into the question box and we can run through those for you as we go through the demonstration today. Okay, so is Bitrix supplied with pre-built business processes? Yes, there are a selection of business processes that are supplied in the system for you. So, for example, such as leave approval in the system. And what we can see here is a selection of those workflows inside the system. So there are select ones such as leave approval, general requests, and business trips that are supplied. We also have some custom processes in here, such as a new starter onboarding process and creating a new project, which we'll look at in some more detail shortly. Okay, so there's no more questions for now. Please do add them into the chat box and we can run through those as we go through the webinar. But let's move on now. So we've seen where the areas in Bitrix24 are where we can create business processes. So let's have a look at actually creating our very own business process from scratch. So to create a business process, what you need is the process editor tool. And this is basically a very advanced visual editor tool that allows you to build your very own business processes. And it uses simple drag and drop technology and includes over 40 pre-built action blocks that you can use to build out your very own business process. So let's go into the CRM entity module and let's create a new business processes that we can run on deals. So we'll just go back into the CRM section. So when you want to create a brand new process, what you can do is you can go to the settings area. And if we just go to the automation section, you can see here the business process section. Okay, and then from there I can select which area of the CRM I want to create this business process for. And I'm going to create this in the deal section. So based on the stage of the deal, we're going to create different actions that will be completed. So I'm going to create a brand new template in the deal section. Okay, and that then opens up the template parameters area. So you need to give the workflow and title and a description about what that process will be. So I'm going to be running this process, so it's going to be looking at what stage the deal is at. And based on that stage, we're going to run certain actions that need to be completed. So I'm going to call this deal stage change. Okay. May 2021. And then we need to select how this process is run in the system. Okay, so you can decide for this to be run automatically, or we could also just run this manually. So you can customize when this needs to be triggered. Okay, so I'm going to take out all of those sections. So it's going to be looking at this, not just when the deal is added, but it's going to constantly be checking for those different stages in the deal process. Okay, and that then opens up the business process editor tool. So you can see on the right hand side all of the different action blocks that can be used when you create a business process. So you can see there's lots of different types of action blocks that you can create. Okay, and in this I'm going to be running a condition. So I'm going to add the condition block. And I'm going to be looking at 3 different stages in the deal. So I'm just going to add another complex branch into that process. And then from here, I need to start adding in the different conditions for this particular process. So first of all, I'm going to be checking to see when the quote has been sent. So I'm going to give this a new title. And the condition type, we're going to be looking at a field. So we're going to be looking at the stage of the deal. Okay, so I need to select here the stage. I'm going to be equaling to when the quote is with the client. Okay, so I'm just going to save that. I'm just going to do the same now for these 2 other conditions, but we're going to be looking at the different stage in the deal process. So we're just doing exactly the same. Instead, we're going to be changing what stage we're going to be looking at. Okay, and then the last stage we're going to be looking at is when the deal has been won. Okay, so we've added those 3 conditions. So this process is constantly going to be looking at when this deal is either at the quote sent, at the negotiation, or when the deal is won stage. And now we've added those different conditions, I can now start adding the different action blocks that we want to add into the system. So what I can now do is start adding those features into here. So you can see all the different areas of the system. So once the quote's been sent, we're going to, let's say we're going to pause for 7 days. And once that 7 days has been processed, so we've waited 7 days, we're still at the quote sent stage, let's arrange a phone call with that contact. Okay, at the negotiation stage, what we might want to do is run a credit check to check they're available for credit. So let's add that information into here. And when the deal's been won, what we might want to do is notify the sales manager. And maybe also send a thank you email to the customer thanking them for their order. So you can see here 3 completely different types of actions that are going to be run based on what stage the deal is at. And on any of these action blocks, you can go into the settings and you can completely customize the actual interface of that action block. So for example, the email that's been sent here, you can see the actual context of the email in the text area here. You can completely customize this. You might want to change the title, for example. So it's completely up to you what information is populated into that process. And in here, we've only got 3 different stages we're looking at. You could completely customize this. So you could add as much kind of conditions and as many action blocks into this as you like. There's no kind of limit on this. So if you wanted to, say, pause for another 7 days and add another phone call later on, you can add all of that functionality into your business process. Okay, so that's one way there. So we could run a process, and this is using the Business Process Designer. And within deals, the other way we could create and run automations is in the automation feature. So inside deals, you can see those stages. So these are the stages we were looking at. So we're at the building quote with client stage, the negotiation stage, and when the deal was won. But we could also use automation to trigger actions. So if I go into here to configure the automations, you can see here the stages that we've got to progress the deal through. And at each stage, we can then run different automation rules. So for example, here, as soon as the deal is added to this pipeline at the confirm requirements, we're going to send out an email to that particular contact about that deal. And what we may also want to do is, once we have sent that email, we might want to, for example, create a task for the responsible person. So you can run different types of activities inside here. So you can see the full variety of different types of actions that you can run. And when we get to the adding details, you might want to send out further client communications. So it could be, for example, an SMS message. And these can be populated dynamically. So inside here, for example, I might want to get some of the information about the deal, for example. Okay, so you can add SMS templates into here. If you do want to use the SMS feature, you will need to integrate with an SMS provider. But what you can do is you can add dynamic text with the rest of your static information, and that can then be run at a certain time frame. So for example, in here, we're going to run this immediately once the deal hits this specific stage. But you might want to say, actually, you want to run this in maybe 5 hours once it's hit that specific stage in the process. So you can customize exactly when that condition is run in the system. And within deals, you've got different pipelines. You can completely customize the automation at every single step of the process. Okay. And if we just go into the leads, exactly the same in terms of the automations that you can run. And once you have set up those automations, those can be triggered automatically in the system. So if we go to the first call stage, for example, in this particular lead, it's now automatically scheduled an outbound call. And if we go to the follow-up call stage, it's now automatically created a task in the system. So you can see that automation taking place. Okay, so that's a look at how we can create a business process using the Business Process Editor tool and also using automation rules and triggers in the CRM system. Okay, if there are any questions, please do add them into the question box and we'll run through those for you before the end of the webinar today. Okay, we just had a question there. Is there an action block for SMS? So yeah, as we've just seen in automation, you can use the automation feature inside here to send out that SMS. So if we just go back into automation, all you need to do is go into the client communications and send SMS, and it will open up the SMS box here where you can then add your SMS message that would get relayed to the customer. As mentioned though, to be able to send SMS messages, you do need to integrate with an SMS provider. Okay, so moving on to how do we actually trigger business processes. So there are several different ways a business process can be triggered in the system. First of all, when you create, for example, a deal or a lead entity, that's one way we can then trigger a business process. So when an entity is created in the system, but also when that is updated as well. So if an update is made to one of those entities, we could then also trigger that business process. For example, when the deal stage is changed, that process we created earlier on is looking at the stage of the deal. So once it gets updated to one of those certain stages we were looking at, it would then automatically trigger that process. You can also manually trigger a process. So like we saw in the activity stream where we were manually using the leave approval form. You can also manually trigger the process inside the CRM and on documents like we saw we were creating and running that first approval business process on a document. We have the ability to use external triggers. So using webhooks, we could trigger a workflow to be created on a certain process from a webhook. And also with the self-hosted system, we could use the API. So if you wanted to run a custom process from another system, we could use the API to trigger a process. And we can also, with the self-hosted, create different types of triggers. For example, you have the ability to create mailbox rules. And with that, it allows you to then create certain processes. So for example, if we just go back into our self-hosted system here, and we go into our control panel, what we have the ability to do is to create rules on mailboxes. If I just go into here, sorry. So if we go into our mail section, you can create rules on any mailboxes you integrate into the system. So a very common one, for example, is the ability to create a rule on a mailbox such as support at. So if you have a support mailbox, we can put rules in place so that could automatically trigger a help desk ticket in the help desk module. So that's a different type of process that could be run on a self-hosted system. And in terms of the API that we mentioned, if you wanted to use the full API, you would need a self-hosted edition. Okay, so question here, is there an automation for voicemail? No, I'm afraid no, there is no automation for voicemail in the system. No, but what you can do is if we just go back into the automation rules, you can send out client communications. One of the features you can do is you can create a robocall. So inside here, you can add a message that would then get relayed to the customer. So I could add that message into here. And once you hit that certain step in the process, once this automation is triggered, it would then send a phone call to that customer. And once they answer the phone call, that message would then get relayed to the customer. And you can choose your language and speed of the speech and the volume. So it doesn't have voicemail automation. No, you would have to use the robocall functionality. Will there be a recording of this session? Yes, absolutely. You'll be soon getting a recording after this webinar of everything we have run through today. Okay, another question. Is there a database for built process to be benchmarked? Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. If you can provide some more details, I'd be happy to go through that question for you. Okay, so now let's have a look at several live examples of how we can run those processes inside Bitrix24. So we'll look at how we can create a brand new project, we'll look at a leave request and a new lead in the system. Okay, so a really useful feature that you may want to create is, for example, when a new customer is onboarded in the system, maybe you want to create a project which brings a group of people together to then start working on that new project in the system. So for example, in here, we're in our company database, and I'm going to manually run what we call our project workflow. So inside here, this opens up a project form, and this is where I can now start adding details about this project in the system. Okay, so let's call this project TechCo. So I'm going to give this project a name. I'm also going to select the manager for who is actually going to be responsible for managing this project. And I'm going to select the actual type of project as well. So that could maybe run a different type of workflow in the system. So project A, there may be certain tasks that need to be completed, and project B, there may be other tasks that need to be completed based on our selection there. So I'm going to start that process in the system. If I go to my workflow section, I was made responsible for that project. So we can see I've got this new workflow in the system that I now need to work on. So first of all, I need to give an estimated completion date. So I'm going to say the 31st of May, and I'm going to accept that project. Okay, so that's now been created. And if we go into our workgroup section, okay, we can now see Project TechCo has been created. And it brought through all of the users who we need to be assembled together to work on this project. And if we go into tasks, it's also brought through the selection of tasks here that we need to complete on this particular project. So this is a really useful way to actually structure any approach to projects in your system. You can bring certain people who are working on that project and create those tasks so that you can almost eliminate any room for error by having a business process that automatically creates those projects for you inside the system. Okay, and let's just have a look at that process in a little more detail. So I'm going to show you the actual workflow, the business process that's used to create that project workflow in the system. Okay, so we saw how we manually created that process. So inside here, first of all, we're requesting information about that project. So we added the information about the project and the estimated completion date. And once that was done, the project group was created, the members were all notified, and it then also brought through the different types of tasks for the project. So you saw how the project A and the project B, based on that selection, it then went down a certain process. So in here, it started to create the scoping tasks as we selected project A. Whereas if we selected project B, it will create different types of tasks in that process. That's a really useful way of really structuring your projects that need to be created inside the system. Okay, secondly, let's have a look at a leave approval. So how you can request annual leave inside the system. So again, we're going to create this manually. So this is in the workflow section of the activity stream. And we can see the different types of processes that we can create from inside here. So for example, I'm going to create the leave approval. And this opens up the leave approval form. In this form, you can completely customize. So you can see here we've got 3 mandatory fields: the start date, the end date, and the absence time. If you wanted to add additional fields into here, that's absolutely fine. For example, you may want to have a document uploaded as the process is being completed. So inside here, I'm going to select, first of all, the date for that particular holiday. So I'm going to choose my dates and I'm going to choose my absence type. And now I'm going to submit that in the system. Okay, and that leave now, it has been requested. And that's now going to be sent off to my manager. Okay, and so once that has been approved in the system, what we're going to do is, if we go into our time and reports area, okay, you can then see all of those annual leaves that are then added into the absence chart. So you can see those leaves that have been added into the system, and we can set permissions for who's able to access any certain area inside the absence chart section. Okay, and another type of process we could run is using the robotic process automation. So inside here, we can create different types of workflows. So this is an expenses workflow inside here. So first of all, what I can do is I'm going to select the plus button here so I can start to add a new workflow into the system. And it opens this pop-up form here. And once again, this is completely customizable, so you can select what fields are added into this form and also what information is mandatory before that form can be submitted. Okay, so I can go into here and add an expense. Let's add an amount and when the expense is going to be accrued. And I'm going to save that in the system. And now that's gone to my manager to either approve or reject in the system. And you saw how that automatically went to the supervisor approval stage. And that's done using the automation rules. So as soon as that's been submitted, we're going to move it to the supervisor approval stage. Okay, and if we go into our manager's area, we can see in here we have 3 assignments. So I'm going to go through and select that assignment we were looking at inside the system. Okay, so it's brought through that information about the expense, so I could either approve or reject that in the system. I'm going to approve it. And we can see now I have received a notification that that expense has been approved. And I could go into our filtering system and I could go to all of our completed workflows and I can see that lunch expense has been processed successfully. And with the robotic process automation, you get a full time log of every single step in that workflow process. Okay, so let's look at several different workflows that we can create inside the system. And now just moving on to some of the features available between the cloud and the self-hosted system. So most of the tools that we've looked at today, they are available in both the cloud and self-hosted solutions. They both include the editor tool, so that business process editor tool we were looking at, and the ability to create processes on different areas of the system, such as documents, in HR for leave approvals, in the CRM system, and on lists. What I would really say is really the main difference and one of the benefits of a self-hosted is the option to run processes on extra modules, such as on user profiles, and the ability to trigger any process externally, either say via an email, so where it could create a support ticket, and also using the API. So if you want to trigger a process based on a process in, say, another system, we could use the API to trigger that process. And just in regards to self-hosted solution, if that is something you're interested in, please do get in touch. You don't have to host a system on premise. It can be hosted via a private cloud, and we also offer our own hosting services here at Interface. Okay, so in summary today, business processes, they can be run on many different areas of the Bitrix24 system, such as in documents, on the CRM entities, in the HR area, and on lists. You can use simple drag and drop workflow technology to build your very own processes in the system. Business processes, they can be triggered manually, automatically, or also by external features as well. Okay, coming soon, here are a selection of other webinars that we will be running through. And if you do have any questions in the meantime, I can't see any new questions in the comments box. If you do have any, please do email sales@interface.com, and we'll be happy to run through those questions and set up a meeting with you. But thank you all for your time today. I hope you found the Better Business Processes webinar useful.